This week's Parsha is Parshas Ki Seitzei. In recent weeks, we dealt with some of the most complicated sugyas in Shas and in Halacha. This week, the sugya will be somewhat a lighter one, but still a fascinating sugya. In this week's Parsha, we learn about various halachas associated with warfare. Ki yikach ish isho chadosho lo yetzei b'tzavo v'lo yaver olav l'chol dovar noki yiyah lebeisei Shana achas v'simach et ishto asher lakach. This is the mitzvah we will be discussing today, proteya v'digdukeya, the general concept, Yesodas Advorim, and the specifics. Rashi explains the mitzvah saseh and the lo ta'aseh. And there are actually two lo ta'aseh in this posuk. Lo yetzer letzava, number 1. V'lo yaver olav lekol dover, number 2. No ki yeh lebeisei v'simach es ishtoi. And the Gemara in Sotah Mem Gimel deals with this question, laver olav b'shnayim. According to Rashi al Torah, it's all about the relationship between the individual and the malchus, the authorities, the king, the army. According to Rashi, in times of war, we do not draft a person, Shana or Rishona. Let him be with his wife and stay at home. Lo yetze letzavo v'lo yaver olav lekol dover. What are these two lavin? As we know, only a fraction of the soldiers are actually combat troops, are engaged in actual combat. Most of the soldiers have supplementary jobs. Lo yetzer letzova means you won't send them into combat. V'lo yaver olav lekol dover. L'sapek mayim v'mazoin. Logistics. Bringing supplies to the front. Food. Drinks. The Ramban agrees with Rashi. Ze perish nochoin. It's also the mishmos of the Rambam, because the Rambam brings this halacha in Hilchas Malachim, not elsewhere. Hilchas Malachim Perek Zayin Halach Yud Aleph, and the Rambam writes, Shana Rishona, we do not take a person to the army. V'lo yetakin drochim, v'lo yishmor l'hachoma. We don't give him any job. He does not serve. So that seems to be obvious. Rashi, Ramban al Torah, and the Rambam in Hilchas Malachim. According to this interpretation, the mitzvah is not upon the chosen. It's not upon the individual. It's a limitation on the authorities. Yes, in times of war, we have the right to expect and to draft each and every citizen, each and every able-bodied citizen. But we would not take a person, Shona Rishona, after he got married. However, the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvah seems to have a slightly different approach. And the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvah seems to be very clear. It's not only in times of war. And the mitzvah is all-encompassing. So, mitzvahs asay, reish yud dalet, shetzivono lehisyachet chosan im ishtoi shona tamimo, shelo yetze chutz le'ir, velo yetze letzavo. Shelo yetze chutz le'ir, number 1, velo yetze letzavo, number 2, velo yaver olav dover mahadvorim hadoyimem la'ela, and anything similar. This formula seems clearly to indicate it's not only about military service. Lo yetze chutz le'ir, v'lo yetze letzova sheyes yached hachoson im ishtoi shona achas. The same regarding the mitzvat lo ta'aseh, shin yud aleph, his hirachatan mitzeit mebeito shana achad kulo, letroach mahatrachim, any tercha. ולא לצאת לצבא ולא לזולתו, אלא נסלק ממנו כל טורח וכל מסע שיהיה חייב בהם לעזוב אותם כל השנה. So the Rambam says not only army, but in this Rambam it also seems to indicate no service. Nisalek memeno kol tircha. However, towards the end of this paragraph, the Rambam writes, Veda, ki achatan atzmo muzhar melatzet mebeito bischora kol shnato. It's not only about the authorities. It's not only that we won't take him out of his home. He is prohibited to leave his home even on a business trip. And that's a gewaldige chiddush. Definitely seems to be different than the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. So there seems to be a stira between the Rambam and Sefer HaMitzvos, Rambam and Mishnah Torah. And I want to share with you my opinion, even though I know it's a chiddush. And most Achronim would disagree with me. But it's not really halacha l'maisa, so I definitely take the liberty to share with you Masher Nera la'anius daiti. That's my minig. Kach gebalti meraboisai. So sometimes there seem to be stiras, contradictions between Sefer HaMitzvos and Mishnah Torah. And my hashkofa, after learning quite a few Rambams, halacha l'maisa is the Mishnah Torah, and only the Mishnah Torah. And Sefer HaMitzvos, the Rambam has a tendency and a tia to be mefarash HaMitzvos lifi pshuton, lav dafka lafi halacha. So there are some very early Achronim that say there could be no contradiction between Sefer HaMitzvos and Mishnah Torah. Because the Rambam in his introduction to Sefer HaMitzvos writes that this Sefer is actually, in a way, an introduction to the Mishnah Torah. And the Rambam, in his introduction to Sefer HaMitzvos, writes that I have a plan to write a Sefer on all the halachas Shabbat Torah, and this Sefer comes before the other one. So some Achronim maintain there could be no contradiction, and my opinion is, well, yes, we should assume there's no contradiction, but the way I see it, by its very nature, it's not a contradiction. Because the Rambam's megama, his entire approach in Sefer HaMitzvos, is different than in Mishnah Torah. When the Rambam writes that Sefer HaMitzvos is an introduction to Mishnah Torah, the way I understand what the Rambam is saying, all the halachas are actually to define mitzvahs. Every mitzvah has its halachas. So before we learn the halachas, let us first understand the essence of Taryag mitzvahs. But the Rambam's analysis of Taryag mitzvahs is not necessarily an analysis and an approach of halacha l'maisa. And therefore, I think we shouldn't wonder if there are contradictions. We shouldn't define them as contradictions. These two Sfarim are different by their very nature. Sefer HaMitzvos was not meant to be a Sefer of Piskei Halacha. Sefer HaMitzvos, the Rambam's approach is to be Mefarash the Mitzvahs in the light of Chazal, but also Lefi Pshutom Shel Devorim, and not Halacha l'maisa. And therefore, Halacha l'maisa, Lani is daiti, the opinion of the Rambam coincides with Rashi and Ramban al Torah. This is a din in Malchus, and in Malchus belvad. However, in Sefer HaMitzvos, the Rambam broadens the scope of this mitzvah. Bein b'mitzvahs aseh, bein b'mitzvahs lo ta'aseh. But it still is a chiddush because the Rambam actually writes a psak. Veda, as I quoted before, shachos anatzmai muzhar melatzeis mebeisoy b'schoire. That is somewhat of a halacha. So my feeling is yes, but that is more of a rotzon Torah. The mitzvah is not to draft. But if the Torah prohibits us to take a chosen into the army, it is because the Torah wants the chosen to spend time at home with his wife. And therefore it wouldn't be right for a chosen to leave his home even for a business trip. That would be my understanding of the Rambam. Sefer HaChinuch, as always, follows in the footsteps of the Rambam. Not in the footsteps of the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, but rather in the path that the Rambam paved in Sefer HaMitzvos. And Sefer HaChinuch makes it very clear the mitzvah is not only on the authorities, on the chosen as well. Tov Kuf Pei Aleph. lo ta'aseh. Shelo yetze chosen mebeisei kol Shona. Afilu letzorchei tzibur. Afilu letzorchei tzibur. Not only letzorchei tzibur, even tzorchei tzibur. So it seems clearly to indicate you cannot go on a business trip either. It's not only on his personal needs, even letzorchei tzibur, he doesn't leave his house. And the chinuch was on. Shenim nachosnem alatzeis mebeisei kol Shona kloimer lalechet b'masaot rechukim. V'nime gam kein sarat tzava melotziu bal kocho. That's gam kein. But he should not go for lengthy trips. Tov kuf pei beis is the mitzvah to say. She yismach achosan amishto shonach, shenitztavenu she yismach achatan amishto shonach. Klomar, shelo yiso chutz li'il etzeis lemachomo. ולא לעניינים אחרים. שלא יצא חוץ לעיר לצייס למלחמה, ולא לעניינים אחרים. So it's obvious that the Sefer Chinuch follows in the footsteps of the Rambam. So when the Rambam writes he can't make a business trip, that is somewhat of a chiddush. The Radbaz, Chuvas Radbaz, Chelek Aleph Reish Lamed Ches asks a very fundamental question. So if he is a business person, so how do you expect him to provide for his wife an entire year? Okay, so if he'll starve her to death, is that a reasonable way to make her happy? Will that make her very happy? So the Radbaz asks, why would there be a prohibition? And here the Radbaz comes with a remarkable revelation. He says this is a mistake. This halacha is a mistake. And it is the mistake of the translator. The Rambam was the Rav Roshi in Cairo, in Egypt, 500 years ago. So he knew Arabic. And he quotes the Rambam's original language because Sefer HaMitzvos that Rambam wrote in Arabic and was translated into Lashon Kodesh. So in the Rambam's words, what the Sefer said is, Veda shachosen oselo letzeis laderach. Bischoiro is an addition of the translator, and that's a mistake, argues the Radbaz. We won't take him out of his home for community service. But he is entitled to leave his home for the benefit of his family. For Parnasa, he could leave. That's the Radbaz. And the Gedolei Asfardim follow in the footsteps of the Radbaz, as we could imagine. The Chidosh, Sharas Shuvas Chaim Shor Chelek Aleph Siman Tzaddik Gimel, maybe Chov Gimel. Sometimes my memory isn't that accurate. Rav Pa'olim, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, Shalas Shuvas Rav Pa'olim, Even Ezer Chelek Gimel Siman Tet. They deal with the very same question. Could he go for a business trip? And they say yes, based on the Radbaz. The Chachmas Adam, the Chaye Odam, was an Ashkenazi, and he disagrees with the Radbaz. And he says, no, we should learn this Rambam as is. And the Rambam writes that a Chosen can't go for a business trip. So the Radbaz wonders, so what do you expect him to do, starve his wife to hunger? So the Chaye Odam says, well, if his wife is Meichel, then he could go. If she's hungry and she would like him to bring some money home, then if he has her consent, then he definitely could leave. But without her consent, the Isser is even for Sechairo. So that is what we find in Chachma Sodom, Shah Beis Enoshim, Hilchas Neder, Kuf Yutet, Sif Yutes, and in Bina Sodom, Siman Yutes, Sif Kotten Lamed Zayin. He disagrees with the Radbaz, and he accepts the Psak of the Rambam as is. Which brings us to a very fundamental question. So the Chachma Sodom writes this halacha, but we do not find it in the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. In the Rambam, but not in Torah or Shulchan Aruch, and why not? So based on what I said up to this point, my understanding would be the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch are based on the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, not the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs. And I made this very clear just a few moments ago. And the Rambam in Mishnah Torah writes these halachas in Hilchas Malachim. There is no Hilchas Malachim in Torah and Shulchan Aruch. As we know, the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam is all-encompassing. It covers the entirety of Torah Shebal Peh, Taryag Mitzvahs. But the Tur had a different philosophy. The Tur only writes Orach Chaim, Yoredeya, Even Ezach Mishpat, only the halachas that are Nagea B'Zman Hazeh. So in the days of the Tur and Shulchan Aruch, Ein Malchus B'Yisrael. We had no autonomy. We had no sovereignty. There was no Jewish state. So there is no Malchus, there is no army, and that is why the Tur doesn't write these halachas. Yes, according to the Chinuch, according to the Rambam, seems to be very clear in Sefer HaMitzvahs that a chosn cannot leave his house, maybe even for a business trip, but the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch are based on the Rambam in Hilchas Malachim. That is a din of Malchus, and that's why it's not brought in Shulchan Aruch. Then at Seven Hamek Dover has a slightly different approach to explain why the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring this halacha. And the Hamek Dover goes to the extent of arguing this is not a mitzvahs asay at all. It's just a halacha mesuyemes, a detail in Hilchas Malchama, that the authorities have no right to draft a person Shana Rishona. But it's not upon the chosan, and it's not defined as a mitzvah asay. I think that's an exaggeration. So was not the Netziv aware that the Rambam brings it in Sefer HaMitzvahs? The Chinuch brings it in Sefer HaMitzvahs? And it is clear in their words, yes, it is a mitzvah asay that rests upon the chosan. So why doesn't the Shulchan Aruch bring it? I think I explained that very clearly. It is a mitzvah asay, but it's a mitzvah on the Malchus, and it's not Nogeya B'Zman Hazeh. There is no Malchus. Well, B'Zman Hazeh, once again, it would be Nogeya, but not in the times of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch. So then at Sivan HaMikdavar goes to the extreme, and he says it's not a mitzvah asay. However, there are some Rishonim which definitely would agree with him. I explained many times we have many Sifrei Mitzvahs. The earliest ones are the Halachos Gedolos and Rasag, Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon. So in the minion of the Rasag, we do not find this mitzvah. Neither in the Smak, Sefer Mitzvahs Cotton, who was one of the Baalei HaTosfos. Obviously, according to their approach, is exactly what the Netziv argues. It's not a mitzvah asay at all. It's just one of the halachas and Torah Malchama, but it's not defined as a mitzvah asay. But the majority of Moinei HaMitzvahs do bring this mitzvah, the Rambam and the Smag, the Ramban, the Chinuch, Sefer Yereim, the Tashbetz and Zohar Harakia. All these do bring the mitzvah of Nokiya Lebeisoi, Loi Yetzei Letzava. Approach number 3. Why don't we find this in Shulchan Aruch? Mori V'Rabbi, the Tzanzer Rebbe, the Divrei Yatzeh, was a big machmir in Shana Rishona. He was very forceful about this. And he demanded from Chasanim, don't leave your home, Shana Rishona, not even for one night. And Chassidim that came to the Rebbe for Yom Tovim, he argued they should come with their wives. You don't leave your house. To the extent, Shalosh Tshuvas Divrei Yatzeh, Orach Chaim Chelik Beisim Arei Shayin Dalet, he says Chosan Shana Rishona should not sleep in the sukkah, and that's a gewaldige chiddush. The Rambam and Sefer HaChinuch make it clear, Lo yisa chitz le'ir, masaot rechokim, yomim rabim. It is clear in the Rishonim that this prohibition is only going on a long journey, being away for an extended period. But leaving the bedroom to sleep in the sukkah, why would that be a problem of Nokiya Lebeisoi? So this Divrei Yatzeh is really a very extreme psak. But B'Shulei Hagilion, at the end of the letter, Ohr HaChaim, Chelik Beis Reish Ayin Daled, the Tzanzer Rebbe, the Divrei Yatzav, has an interesting argument. Even Ezer Samach Beis Sif Yud Gimel. Shulchan Aruch says, Meikar Dina de Gemara, you say Simcha b'ma'oinoi Shana Rishona, 12 months. Aval hu idno, in our times, Orvo kol Simcha. After Chorma Bayis, there is no Simcha, so we don't say a Simcha b'ma'oinoi, only Shivas Yemei HaMishta. So the Kloizer Magereba argues, in Orva kol Simcha, we don't say Simcha b'ma'oinoi, then there is also no longer a mitzvah of Noki Ela Beisa v'Simcha Sishlei. Vashkof Rishona, this is a gewaldige Thema. How do we compare a mitzvah say to a bracha? To Zimun. Well, Zimun is not a chiyuv to say Simcha b'ma'oinoi. It's what we do. It's the minhag. It's halacha. But it's not a chiyuv. So if there's no longer any simcha, we wouldn't say all year round Simcha b'ma'oinoi. But if there's a mitzvah say Noki Ela Beisa, why would that depend whether there is simcha or not? However, I think he has a very powerful point, because the Ritvan Ksubas Daf Ches and the Rosh Perakam the Ksubas Daf Siman Yud Gimel, Bala Itur, Abu Darham, Hilchas Berchos Chasanam, they all say the origin and the basic rationale of this halacha Yud Beis Chodesh we say Simcha b'ma'oinoi is only because of the posuk Noki Ela Beisa Shana Achas v'Simachas Ishtoi Asher Lokacha B'Hatalia. So if the Shulchan Aruch says we do not say Simcha b'ma'oinoi, that means because there no longer is the Simachas Ishtoi because of Chorma Bayis. But this brings us to an extremely relevant question. So, we saw that according to the Sefer HaChinuch, Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, and many others, it is a mitzvah say. What is the nature of this mitzvah say? Is it Bekum Vaseh or Sheval Tais? Reb Chaim Bruske taught us. There's a mitzvah say and there is a Isur Asay. Not every Asay is a positive precept, a positive mitzvah, kum v'asei. Sometimes it's a prohibition that is based on an asay. Let me further explain the Chakira. There are two ways to learn Pshat. Noki Yela Beisai Shona Achas v'Simachas Ishtoi Asher Lakach. One could argue he has a mitzvah to make his wife happy, and therefore he needs to be at home. So the focus is on the mitzvah to make his wife happy. Mahusa mitzvah, the ikar mitzvah is v'simachas ishtoi asher lokach, and because we need to give him the opportunity and the ability to perform this mitzvah, therefore noki yela beisoi lo yetzel etzavo. Maybe it goes the other way around. Noki yela beisoi shona achas, because it's only natural that he makes his wife happy. He doesn't have to chiyuv to make her happy, but that's what the Torah wants. It is the nature of things that newlyweds try to make each other happy and to be happy together. They go for honeymoons, and therefore, just to give them the opportunity to be happy together, we have a mitzvah. Well, what is the mitzvah? Lo yetzel etzavo, noki yiyah lebeis. So does he actually have a mitzvah to make her happy? Like v'samachta b'chagecha? Ba'alo misamcha? Or no? It's just the nature of things. And therefore the Torah says, Noki yela beisoi, kedei shiuchal lesameach et ishto. I think this is a machlokes between the Rishonim. The Rambam and Sefer HaChinuch seem clearly to say it's a mitzvah b'sheval tais, it's a isur asay. So let's go back to the wording of the Rambam and mitzvah asay reish ayin dalet that I quoted before. שציוונו להסייחד החוסן המשתו שונת מימו, שלא יצא חוץ לעיר, ולא יצא לצובו, ולא יעבור עליו דובה מהדבור המדוימם לאלו. What is the mitzvah? Le'esyached choser emishtoi shelo yeitzei. The same in Sefer HaChinuch. Shenetztavenu sheyismach hachatan emishto shonachas Klomar, שלא ייסו חיץ לעיר לצייס למלחומה ולא לעניונם זולוסו ולא לעניונם אחרים. The mitzvah is שלא יצא, שלא ייסע. But the Yereim is the only one of the Rishonim that says, no, the Chosan has a mitzvah to make his wife happy. And the Yereim deals with the question, how? I think about a year ago, I gave a shiur about Simcha. That was the topic of the shiur, Simcha. And I wrote, I think there are 16 different mitzvahs of Simcha. Simchas Yom Tov, Simchas Purim, Simchas Chosan V'Kala, Simchas HaTorah, Simchas HaMitzvah. And I also broke the nature of Simcha to different categories. Sometimes Simcha is associated with Achila V'Shtiyah. Bosa v'yayin, chai v'nishlu v'sumei. The nature of Simchas Chosan V'Kala is similar to the nature of Simchas Beis HaShoyevo. Song and dance. So the Yereim says, what is the nature of the mitzvah of Simchas Ishtoi? B'kol dova shehu yodeya l'samcha. Well, we expect you to know what makes your wife happy. If you don't know, then you're in tzoros. If you don't know, go back to the Madrich Chatanim that prepared you for the Chasen. We expect you to know after a day or two how to make your wife happy, what she likes. How could you just make her happier than she is? So the Yereim writes that the Chosan has a mitzvah to make his wife happy in any way he knows he could make her happy. So according to the Yereim, it's kum v'asei. So because he needs to make her happy, that's why we don't take him out of the house. According to the Rambam, the chinuch, the mitzvah is don't leave your house, don't take him out of the house. He should be able to make her happy. So according to the Rambam and the chinuch, it's not really a mitzvah of simcha. The mitzvah is leave him at home, give him the opportunity to be happy. And therefore, Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring this mitzvah, and it also gives added logic and weight to what the Kloiser Magareve says. So if Bisman Hazeh there is really no simcha, then there's no longer a peda, no kiyela beisoy, because they're not that happy anyway. Which brings us to another fundamental question. If the woman is not makbid, she wants her husband to leave, may he do so. Is mechila valid or not? So the Radbaz asks, what? According to the Rambam, he can't leave his house for a business trip, so how do you expect him to provide for his wife? Is that a way to make her happy? To starve her? So the Chachma Sodom does write that he cannot go for business. However, the Chachma Sodom says, well, but if his wife wants him to leave, and she is moichel, then he definitely could leave the house. In our times, this comes up in two different situations. Yes, if the chazan is a business guy and his wife would say, I can't leave the house because I'm a teacher and I have a job, but I don't mind if you travel a week or two and I'm going back to my mom and to my family, and I hope you come back with $100,000. That's a way to make her happy. Another situation might be by Hasidim. So the wife says, I know how much going to the Rebbe means to you, so I don't mind. I'm going to go back to my family and have a good time in the Rebbe's hoif. I hope you come back ungezapt, full of Torah and Yerushalayim and Midas Toivus. So is Mechila valid? Sefer HaChinuch says no. However, he brings an opinion. Yesh oimrim de mahana Mechila. Chayodim says yes. In my opinion, this once again defines on the definition of V'simachas Ishtoi. Rashi writes, V'simachas Ishtoi shonachas, V'yechedi yas itzo. In Lashon Kodesh, v'simach es ishtoi, make your wife happy. And the metargim that says v'simach im ishtoi is a mistake. V'simach im ishtoi would be happy with her, together with her. So Rashi always follows Targum Onkelos. That is a basic rule. And Targum Onkelos actually writes exactly the words of Rashi. V'yechedi yat itso. Targum Yonasan ben Azil is the other version that Rashi rejects. Targum Yonasan ben Azil writes v'yechedo im intiso, with his wife, not making her happy, but being happy with her. So if the mitzvah is to make her happy, then mechila probably would be relevant. But if the mitzvah is both of them should be happy together, then mechila would have no relevance. Rotzen HaTorah, that the man be happy together with his wife, that they spend time together. So why would mechila be relevant? The concept of mechila is only relevant when one person is obligated towards another. You have an obligation and she has a right. She could forego her rights and she could pater you from your obligations. But that is only if the proper interpretation and translation would be v'simach es ishtoi. According to Yonasan ben Azil, v'simach im ishtoi, mechila would bear no relevance. So Sefer HaChinuch lishitosoi. Because the Agdor of Sefer HaChinuch is Tov Kuf Pei Beis, mitzvah sheyismach hachatan im ishto. Lo sheyisameach hachatan et ishto, but rather sheyismach hachatan im ishto. So this question depends on the two different interpretations and translations we find. On one hand, Targum Onkelos, on the other hand, Targum Yonasan ben Azil. There's a surprising tshuva in Chasam Sofer, Even Ezer Chelik Beisim and Kuf Nun Hey, and the Chasam Sofer deals with the very same issues. Could a person leave his home to go on a business trip, to provide for his family? And the Chasam Sofer suggests two different interpretations on the basis of the mitzvah, the fundamental idea of Noki Ela Beisim V'Simchas Lishtoi. Both interpretations are novel, are new. But the Chasam Sofer has tremendous weight. Number one, the Torah doesn't want a chassan to leave home Shana Rishona because he might be attracted to another woman. He doesn't know his wife that well yet. The love still is at the beginning, and the Torah's choshesh, he might forget about his wife, and he might be attracted to another, and that is why the Torah asks us, don't leave your home. Don't take this young man out of his home. He should be spending time together with his wife. The other approach is a gewaldige chiddush. It's not about him at all. It's about army service. We want our soldiers to be focused, to concentrate on fulfilling their duty, to fight with all their heart and all their mind and all their might. But this chassan will be distracted. He's going to think about his wife sitting at home. And we're afraid he cannot fulfill his duties as we expect him to do. And therefore, better leave him home. So if that is the reason, then mechila wouldn't be relevant. According to both approaches of the Chasam Sofer, mechila wouldn't be relevant. But the difference would be, could he go for personal trips? Parnasa, business. According to the approach number one, no, we don't want him to leave his home. We don't want him to be disloyal to his wife. And therefore, if he can't go to army service, kal v'chomer, he shouldn't be going for personal trips, for vacations, for business trips. But if it's only about fulfilling his duties in a proper way, then okay, he could go for business trips. But the Chasam Sofer stresses, lo darshinan tam edikro. I find this entire tshuva a big chiddush, because both interpretations are not pshutam shel devarim. Pshutim shel dvorim kelishne dekra. No ki ela beis shonachas v'simach es ishtoi. Kodesh Baruch Hu wants this young husband and wife to cement their relationship, to strengthen the foundation of this new family, to develop a liking for each other and to spend time together. That is Pashtus Advorim. So both Chidushim and interpretations of the Chassam Sofer, I think, both are a gewaldige Chiddush. So we discussed a fascinating mitzvah and different facets of this mitzvah, the basic interpretations and various questions, even halacha l'maisa, and whether this mitzvah is nogea b'zman hazeh. Ki seitzei lemelchamo al oivecha unesonei Hashem Elokecha miyodecha. Pshutei shel mikra. We're dealing with war. War waged between countries, armies, people killing each other. Becherev ubechanis, bemagen uberomach. So war has evolved. No longer swords and spears and shields and bows and arrows. Missiles and anti-missile missiles and anti-missile missiles and planes and smart bombs and dumb bombs. But it's basically the same. We are in Chodesh Elul, and I constantly say, whatever we learn in Elul must be with a blick of Elul, through the prism of Elul, through the lenses of Elul. So both Sifrei Musar and Sifrei Chasidus offer an interpretation of this parsha. And the sources are in Midrash Chazal. We're not only dealing with war between nations, armies, peoples, but also the greatest of wars, the greatest of battles, and that's Melchemes HaYetzer. And why do I say this is the greatest of battles? Chovis Alvavis Shar Yichud HaMaisa Perek Hey. So the Chovis Alvavis tells the story of a great general coming home from the battlefield, victorious. And the people come out to the street to cheer him, to applaud him, just to see him. And he is admired and adulated, like great generals and great warriors coming back from the battlefield. And a chassid approached that general and he said, "You think you're coming back from a great battle? No. You're coming back from a minor battle, and the big one is still before you. And what is that? Melchemes HaYetzer." Why is that the Melchama Gedola? By the nature of war, one side is victorious and the other party is vanquished. We knew short wars and long wars. Israel had a miraculous 6-day war. I was a young boy. We arrived in Israel a few months earlier. I was 14 years old at the time, but I vividly remember. Nissim v'neflois. The whole world was shocked and astounded. 6 days, a war on 3 fronts: Egypt, Jordan, Syria. Nissim v'neflois. World War II took 5 years. Nobody knows how many people died in World War II. Modest estimate, 50 million people. The Vietnam War took 17 years. But by the nature of war, when it's all over, and when the fog of war subsides, it is clear who won and who lost. By every war besides Melchemes HaYetzer. The Mishnah says in Ovis, Perek Beis, Mishnah Daled, Al tamen ba'atzmacho ad yoim moischo. Yochanan Kohen Gadol shemish bekuna gedola 50 shana v'lebesaf naset tzedoki. It's never over. Ad zabula bisraisa, till your last breath. You can never be confident that you won. The Yetzer Hara, you knock him to the floor, and he always springs up again. Fresh, powerful, as if it wasn't a knockout. You think it was a knockout. He's down on the parquet, and you don't know how, but he's always up again. Yochanan Kohen Gadol Shemesh Shmoinim Shona Bekuhula Gedola V'le B'soif Nasa Tzedoki. So the Chassid was right when he said, this is the Malchama HaGedola. How do you win this war? Ki seitze lemalchama alavecho nesona Hashem alakecho biyodecho. You just need to go and wage war. Kadosh Baruch Hu will be with you. Abolatayim Messiah. Just take up arms. Brochas Daf Hayom Medalef, a very famous Gemara. Lo olam yargez odem yetzer hatoiv al yetzer hara. Nitzchoi mutav lo nitzchoi yasek betoira. Lo nitzchoi yikro kriyas shema. Lo nitzchoi yaskala yoim amisa. And Chazal darshan the posek rigzu al tichto. Imre balvavchem al mishkavchem v'doi muselo. So it's a question I asked many times. Many of us, especially as so, learn Torah all day. Tens of thousands. Yeshiva bochum, koilel guys, learn all day. Yikro Kriya Shema. Torah, we need to say Kriya Shema twice a day, Shachris v'Arvis. But we go far beyond that. We say Kriya Shema 4 times a day. First time before Psuka de Zimmer. That's a meaning that's brought in Tur and Simen Menvav. After Kriya Shema Shalavis, we once again say Kriya Shema Shalamito. So we have Torah, we have Kriya Shema. How about Yom HaMisa? When in Yerushalayim, they don't let you forget Yom HaMisa for 1 hour. Every 15 minutes, there's another announcement, another car with a megaphone and a loudspeaker announcing Galavaya. I have a good friend, such a sensitive soul. He couldn't bear it. He left Yerushalayim. He says, it makes me so depressed, hearing every 10 minutes another Levaya. So, how come not all of them are tzaddikim gemurim? How could it be? We learn Torah all day. We say Kriya Shema 4 times a day. And how about the Chevra Kedisha guys that are burying the dead all day and all night? How come they still have a problem with the Yetzer Hara? The answer is very simple. Everybody remembers the 3 formulas, Yasik B'Torah, Yikro Kriya Shema, Yaskala Yom HaMisa. But people tend to forget how this Mama Chazal begins. La oilam yargez odam yetzer toiv al yetzer hara. Rashi writes, Yasa melchama em yetzer hara. You need to fight him. The best equipped army in the world, the most advanced fighter planes, the most advanced tanks, the best artillery, the best trained troops. But if you're not going to fight, don't expect to win. No army in history won a war without waging war. Many of us aren't aware that this is war. Many of us cozy up to the Yetzer Hara, and they have a great relationship with the Yetzer Hara. They don't see him as an enemy. They don't identify him as an adversary. They live in peace with the Yetzer Hara. So how do you expect to win if you don't fight? Torah, Kriya Shema, Yom HaMisa. Those are weapons in your arsenal. Those are the ways, those are the tactics. But without fighting, you could never win. And you're not fighting. This is the time to be aware. It's a struggle. It's a battle. You have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Ra. K'shezeh comes zeh neufel. Yargez odam Yetzer HaTov al Yetzer Hara. All HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects from you is go and fight. Ki seitze lemalcham alavecha. And I promise, unasonai Hashem Elokecho biyodecho. Go and fight. fight with Torah, fight with Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, fight with a Nova and Midas Toives, Yaskala Yoim Amisa. Oda Matayr Atzumay Melamato, Matayr Anoise Melamala, Aboletayr Misayin Loy. Rabbeinu Yonah writes in the very beginning of Shari Tshuva, when a person does Tshuva, he has tremendous Shiyata Dishmaya, above and beyond Derech HaTeva, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was waiting for us to do Tshuva. Ki seitze lemacham aloivecha, onasonai Hashem Eloikecha biyodecha. So when we fight, when we wage war, there are two ways to win. In days of yore, hundreds of years ago, before we had modern technology, hundreds of thousands of warriors stood against each other. And the bloodshed was unbelievable. Thousands upon thousands were cut to pieces, were killed. But as Toras HaMalchama, the art of war, developed, and as technology developed, a smart army doesn't just kill enemy soldiers. You try to destroy the enemy's capacity to wage war, his motivation to wage war. You need to destroy his infrastructure, transportation. You try to bomb his airfields, his runways. Planes can't get up to the air. You destroy his bridges. You destroy the highways, the train tracks. If he can't mobilize, he can't bring troops to the front, he can't bring supplies to the front, then he can't wage war. You try to destroy his industry. He can't produce tanks, planes, trucks, vehicles, armaments. You try to destroy his energy depots. Without oil, vehicles can't move. In a way, you try to hurt the civilian population, to make war unpopular. That is the way to win a modern war. And that is the way to save thousands or hundreds of thousands of lives. It is the same with Malchemes HaYetzer. You could fight and fight and fight, but you're going to ultimately lose. He's a powerful enemy, stronger than you. You need to fight his resources. And those are the midos. So if you learn Sefer Kedusha of the Rambam, Macholas Esuras Anesuri Bia, that is based on Taiva. All the Averis Shebenodom Lachaveiro, Gneva Vexeilan, Choiva Lamasik, that is all based on Kina and Kavod. So a smart warrior, if you want to fight your Yetzer, you need to work on your Midas. That is the source of all evil. Aim kol chatos. You need to be one of the disciples, Talmidim of Avraham Avinu, Ayin Toivo, Ruach Numucha, Nefesh Shafelo. Those are the keys. Those are the resources from which your Yetzer Hara derives his strength and his power. This is the time. It's Chodesh Elul, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu waits for us to come back to him, to do tshuva, to be better. So Baruch Hashem, and as I saw this week, thousands, tens of thousands of Bnei Torah came back to the yeshivas, and it's a gewaldige simcha. We cannot exist without yeshivas and without Botei Talmud. Miyameim shel aviseinu lo posku yeshiva mehem yom daf chofches yordu leMitzrayim yeshiva emohim yordu Babel yeshiva emohim. In the terrible days of the Holocaust, almost all the yeshivas were closed. But the Naitri yeshiva, my great Rebbe, Kloiser Rebbe Zivuk Sheni, married the daughter of the Naitra Rav, And the Tzanzer Emetzen passed away just a few months ago. She was an unbelievable tzaddikus. He and his yeshiva went into the forest, and they were learning Torah. In the Warsaw Ghetto, at the time of the uprising, some fought the Germans with guns, and at the very same time, young B'nai Torah Gerach Hasidim were learning in the cellars. And they learned Torah till their last breath, as vividly described in a book written by the Moshe Prager, Eile Shelo Nichnu. I think it was translated into English as well. Mia mehem shelavuseinu loy posku yeshiva mehem. Yodel Mitzrayim yeshiva moam. Avrom zokan v'yoshev b'yeshiva. The Ovis Agdoshim, the very first Jew, was the very first Rosh Yeshiva. Avrom zokan v'yoshev b'yeshiva. Yitzchok zokan v'yoshev b'yeshiva. And when Yankov goes to Eretz Mitzrayim, it's Yehuda Sholach Lefonov, Letaken loy beis Talmud. I wasn't there, I don't remember. But I imagine. Yehuda is taken aback, and he asks his father, why should I go alone? I want to go together with you. I want to be Makayim Kibud Avim in the way. I want to hear Torah from you. Why do you send me to run in advance on my own? Yankov Avinu says, Letaken loy beis Talmud. We'll get there. We'll open a koilel. Yankov Avinu says, I will not set foot in a town in which there is no beis Talmud. Go ahead on your own. When I get there, I want a koilel. I want a beis Talmud. So the yeshivas are the oxygen that keeps us going. And we've been waiting for this moment. So the vast majority of yeshivas made an unbelievable effort to comply with the rules of Mishlad Abriot. And we need to find the right balance. Getting our boys back to yeshiva, going back to koilel. We opened our koilel this week. I hope to give the first shiur there tomorrow. Find the right balance between safeguarding our children and our elders and our communities, wearing masks, social distancing, and coming back to the yeshivas. And I hope b'siyata d'shmaya b'schus ha'Torah shelo yisham ha'shoid v'sheva v'lo yitei tzvocha b'rochoi v'seinu. Kodesh Baruch Hu should watch over all of us. We should know no tragedy, no pain, and no suffering. There's a new year coming. Tichle Shona v'kira lo yiseo. Tochel Shona v'bercho yiseo. Kodesh Baruch Hu should take this pandemic away. And we should only know, b'soides toivas Yeshuas v'nachomois, eksiva v'chasim ha'toiva lono v'lekol beis Yisrael.